receding hairline. I got fine. Yeah. Still, a ribbon. No, it's still falling. Conversation is flowing here. Sure. This is my dad. Mine is Sherlock Holmes. Say something like investigating the mysterious food. Yeah. How can they use the same 5 ingredients to make so many different things? You know what? That's good. And when it comes boiling down to it, it's three. Chili, onions, gotta have corn. And beans. All these different combinations, and it's all good. Well, when you think about it, that's most American. Basic ingredients. I mean, you can taste flour, sugar, and I think the thing is that it all looks like the same color. At least it's cool in here. Hi, Mark. Good morning. It is cool. It's cool in here. You was outside. No. You just really get ready to smoke. All the voices are curious. Tell you what happened. I took mine 4 beers, and I ran into the guy. To make me a power and it did. So my intention was to recreate it with any good stuff that I could. I forgot I hadn't done it. So I'm looking at it this morning. I'm been doing hard work. See, we didn't put enough trust in Congress. They just did it. They do things in spurts. Yep. Hey, Mark. Yeah. In my haste, can't talk. In my haste this morning, I forgot for the job listings. I had them all printed out. So can I go in your office and print out some job listings? And it's in Excel in my area. We'll go with it. Sure. I got another one coming up on my back. Good morning. Good morning. Are you excited? Well, hello. Everyone's quiet. I'm in Hebrews chapter 2. I invite you to be there as well. I was just telling Michelle, a little sore from yard work the last 2 or 3 days. Melanie was out there with a whip. And serves her right. She's got a UTI. And so she is not going to be here this morning. She's in a tremendous amount of pain. And I think she just worked too hard as well. Hope y'all are well. Hebrews chapter 2, all we're going to be focusing on this morning is verses 5 through 9. So I know what you're thinking. Maybe we'll get out of class early today. We'll have a little more time to hang around the fountain. What? You're going, I don't think so. All right. I got a phone that won't be quiet. Okay. So I'm a little tired this morning. I want to show you this, and then I'll have it in a clear I tend to make this into a more clear chart. But what we have here is several Old Testament passages. Like today, there's a one there. It has Psalm 8, 4 through 6, and it is controlling chapter 2, verses 5 through 18. What we have are 7 sections that we're going to be looking at. This chart actually shows 8. But you have chapter 2, verses 5 through 18, that have it's going to be based on, it's going to be focusing on a major Old Testament passage. That doesn't mean he's not going to cite others, but the one that we're going to be focusing on today is Psalm 8, specifically verses 4 through 6, that are quoted in Hebrews 2, verses 6 through 8. So Psalm 8, 4 through 6, Hebrews 2, 6 through 8. And this is going to be the main passage that dictates chapter 2, verses 5 through 18. All of these are in a chart in the material that I printed out. So you don't need this chart necessarily. So what is Psalm 8 about? I'm hoping if as you look at Psalm 8 or already have in prep for this class, you're reminded of just how wonderful it is. So I'm in Hebrews 2. I see, let's just read these verses 5 through 9. For it was not to angels that God subjected the world to come, of which we are speaking. It has been testified somewhere. What is man that you are mindful of him, or the Son of Man that you care for him? You have made him a little lower than the angels. You have crowned him with glory and honor, putting everything in subjection under his feet. All right. Now, in putting everything in subjection to him, who's him? Jesus. He left nothing outside his control. At present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him. But we see him who for a little while was made lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. Well, this is a sermon, and he is using this as a major text and is making a series of arguments based on it. And so we're going to just focus on these verses here. Psalm 8, a psalm of David. And somebody take a look at Psalm 8 and then tell us what it's about. What's going on in Psalm 8? Sir?
Praise and exhortation.
Well, that's a lot of the Psalms. Can you be more specific? I mean, you're absolutely right.
Well, just can't remember.
Okay. So let's take a look at this. We've already looked at chapter 1 through chapter 2, verse 4. That's the first. That's the introduction to the letter. And you remember how in the first 4 verses, which is one sentence, he has 7 references to Jesus, descriptions of Jesus. We already saw that. We already looked at that. That's lesson 1 of our study. In lesson 2, we looked at Hebrews 1, verses 5 through 14, and saw comparisons being made between Jesus, who is superior to angels, and how many passages, how many Old Testament quotations were there in Hebrews 1, 5 through 14? 7. Isn't that really interesting? And then chapter 2 is a new chapter for us in our Bibles, but it's finishing the introduction with that very sobering warning. And there are 5 warnings in Hebrews. And so Hebrews 2, 1 through 4 was the first one. We've got to listen. We've got to listen seriously and carefully to Jesus, lest we drift away. And that's what we looked at last week. Boy, was that just a week ago? And so now he is turning to the first major section, I would suggest, that is controlled by Psalm 8, verses 4 through 6. And so what is he talking about? How Psalm 8 is talking about Jesus becoming human and fulfilling humanity's destiny. So in the original context of Psalm 8, is David trying to describe the Messiah? Is he trying to describe Jesus? Remember, David's writing 1,000 years before Jesus. He is a prophet, writing by inspiration. But when I read Psalm 8, it's not speaking about Jesus. It's talking about humanity. And what is it about humanity? We've been made a little lower than the angels as humans. What does that mean?
Well, we've been made first by God for a special purpose. And he also created everything around us for our benefit.
That's right, it's for us. Yes, sir.
Well, just basically the same thing, except angels are greater than man, and yet they are, as we see in the last verse of this chapter, servants and ministers.
Okay, are they not ministers?
Yeah, and they, Christ died on the cross, not for angels, but for me. In other words, the greatest gift of God, his son, was for the benefit of man who is a little lower than angels.
So when the original audience is listening to this, I mean, these are Jews who know their Old Testaments. Maybe they thought, oh yeah, Psalm 8, yeah, that's one of my favorite. I love that psalm. Oh, he's applying it to Jesus. In its original context, who is it talking about? Us. And look at Hebrews 1, verse 14. Before we talk about it, let's get Clark. Yes, sir.
It's a great example of the humility that was shown, because it would have been humble for Jesus to come as a king among men, but he didn't come as that. He came born in Nazareth. So the amount of humility shown by God is expressed in Psalm 8, because it even says, that they were lesser than angels, mankind.
Right. So take a look at Hebrews 1:14. How does that inform this concept of us being made lower than the angels? Who do the angels, as ministering spirits, they're just messengers. That's all. They're messengers. That's what the word angel means. But who do they serve according to Hebrews 1:14?
They serve man.
Well, what does he specifically say in Hebrews 1:14?
Those who are to inherit salvation.
Those who are to inherit salvation. And who is that? That's us. That's exactly right. And to go along with Clark's point, these are creatures that serve us. In fact, who did Christ die on the cross for? We'll get into that in the book of Hebrews. Who did Christ die for? Angels or humans? Is there a plan of salvation for angels? There is not. Yes, ma'am. Okay, they are. They're in the presence of God. And they are here to minister to us. And so I know some of you might be thinking, yeah, guardian angels. They're here to serve us and protect me while I'm driving down the highway.
When Christ was talking about the Sabbath, he said, man is not made Sabbath, but the Sabbath for man. I think he referred to this very thing about the angels, and talk to you later about it.
No. Hopefully you'll remember. So this first passage, this first section, Psalm 8, verses 4 through 6, being quoted in Hebrews 2, verses 6 through 8, it's about us imitating Jesus, who became human and did exactly what we are meant to do. So remember what he said here? He was made lower than the angels, verse 9, crowned with glory and honor. Why? Because of the suffering of death. Sir?
Yeah, he had to come in the flesh to be like that.
All right. Next week, we're going to talk more about why, specifically, why Jesus came in the flesh. That's verses 10 through 18. But right now, this passage is talking about humanity being the pinnacle of creation. And yet we're a little lower than the angels, but we're more important than the angels. We are the recipients of salvation. In what sense, then, are angels greater than us?
Well, because they are in the presence of God.
Okay, they're in the presence of God. Are they stronger than us? Are they more mysterious than us?
Well, they serve God mainly. They do the things forbidden by God.
Yeah.
And many times for our behalf.
So without explaining that Psalm 8 is really, in this context, talking about human beings, the Hebrew writer just goes straight to Jesus. I mean, what part of this letter so far hasn't been focusing on Jesus? All of it is about Jesus. And so in Psalm 8, it is about praise and exhortation. More specifically, it is about humanity's destiny. And what is it that we are supposed to do as humans here on earth? Rule. What did you say? Dominion. We have dominion. Where does that language come from, by the way? Okay, in the beginning. All right, let me go to this. Over the animals. Genesis 1, verses 26 through 28. Do you remember that? Let's go back and look at those verses carefully. Because Psalm 8 begins with the words, O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth. And the last verse of Psalm 8 says something very similar, actually verbatim. O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth. It is a psalm of praise, but it makes reference to Genesis 1, 26 through 28. So let me read that. Now, does he say, I am now quoting Genesis 1, 26 through 28? No, but listen to these words. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion, rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, over every living thing that moves on the earth. What is man? That you are mindful of him. Or the Son of Man, that you have crowned him with glory and honor, putting everything in subjection under his feet. So Psalm 8 is talking about us. But who does it just happen to also apply to perfectly? Perhaps even better than any mere human, you and me. Jesus.
The amazing thing is, even though he was fully deity, Christ was also fully human.
Right. Explain that to me. So Jesus came in humility, like Clark said. When Jesus was born, he was in Bethlehem of Judea, fulfilling prophecy. Tell me about that city of Bethlehem. What very important Old Testament character was also born in Bethlehem, grew up in Bethlehem? David. And Jesus is a direct descendant of David over the course of 1,000 years. And who is the author of Psalm 8? David. And he's talking about his ultimate son, Jesus, who was born and placed in a feeding trough. I like the word manger a whole lot better, don't you? The King of Kings and Lord of Lords was placed in a feeding trough. Eey. And he grew up in Nazareth, a backwater town. What did Nathanael say when Philip came to him and said, "We found the Messiah and he is from Nazareth"? Well, what did he say?
Can any good thing come out of
Can any good thing come from Corpus Christi? What? And what did Philip say? Come and see. And Nathanael was quite impressed with Jesus, who was of Nazareth. So Jesus took on this submissive role. He was made lower than the angels. Forever? Okay, for a time, not forever. Why? And that's really what next week's lesson is more about. Why did Jesus become human? Why did he subject himself? And I've heard this crude illustration used at times. Let's say you've got this ant hill, and you're mowing the grass, and there's this ant hill, and if you run over that ant hill, it's going to wreak havoc on that ant hill. How can you communicate to ants? Hey, you need to leave. You're about to get mowed over. Dwayne, what do you do when you're mowing and you see an anthill? Do you go, "Oh no, I got to warn them"? Poisons them, then go straight over. Yeah. But what if you really were passionate about saving ants? You stand over them, and what are they going to think? What's this giant jabbering about? Isn't that kind of like God trying to talk to us? The all-powerful being trying to say, "Hey, I'm trying to help you, trying to save you. You're not listening. I know. I will send my son in the form of a human." And so if Dwayne was really worried about these ants, which he's not, he would say, "I know. I'll become an ant, and I will go communicate with them. And those ants will listen, or they'll crucify me." Yeah. Ants. One of God's marvelous creatures. So we reflect God according to Genesis 1:26 through 28, which means we rule, and we are going to be like God in that we are creators, male and female, recreate, just like God creates. We are wise. We are to be like God in that we are righteous. We are under God's authority, but then we have dominion over everything else. And that's what God wanted. He wanted Adam and Eve to rule the world, to create more bearers of his image who would go out into the world, rule the world. And that's what we have today. We have this magnificent human society that loves God and reflects God and is kind and generous toward everybody. That's the world we live in, right? No. Then what happened?
Mankind thought too much of himself.
That's right. Man thought too much of himself, too much of his power, became selfish and rebellious against God. And so instead of seeking God's glory and being glorified by God, man wanted his own glory. So this is not forever. Jesus being subjected to being a little lower than the angels. The humility, it's temporary. But then what follows after the suffering? What follows after the suffering of death? He was crowned with glory and honor. Now, this isn't the only passage in Scripture that talks about the pattern, the plan. We want to be glorified, but before we do, we've got to suffer. Jesus, the Son of God, suffered and then was glorified. Can we expect it to be any different for us? We also suffer. But our view of suffering is very different from the world's view of suffering. Here we go. At present, the promise looks unfulfilled. So there's verse 8. Now, in putting everything in subjection to him, he left nothing outside his control. At present, we do not see everything in subjection to him. Well, why not? Because of humanity's rebellion. And that's what Jesus came into the world to set right. So he shows us an example of what it means to suffer and then be glorified. He shows us an example of what it means to live perfectly sinless. I know I've said this before, but everything that Jesus asks of us, everything, he himself has already done. Now, he's God, we are not God, but we are sons and daughters of God. That's our privilege because of what Jesus has done, so that our sins can be removed and we can be in the adoptive children of God and be in his presence. Jesus died so that we can have this blessing, this hope of being in God's presence one day. But what else does Jesus show us and challenge us to do?
Well, one thing is to strive for and live for something beyond the world today.
Yeah, to live beyond just what this world has to offer.
You know, we have to live here. This is not our home. Jesus is in the presence of God right now. By being in subjection to Jesus and his authority, at some point we also can get that glory and honor. But not everyone gets that. Only those who see God
Go back to that.
in glory and honor and then follow that precept.
Okay. Can you think of, that's excellent. Can you think of some other ways that we are to imitate Jesus? David, what you got?
I think he challenged us to be more like him.
Absolutely. To be holy, to be kind, to rule properly. Yes, sir? To love one another. Yeah, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down his life for his friends, and you are my friends if you do whatever I command you. Yes, sir.
The underlying part of this is that we have a different mindset, a different paradigm, and people of the world that have not yet heard the name of Christ or refused to believe it. We have the knowledge that we're just passing through. People of the world try to live the best life they can here, no matter what it takes, because that's all there is, according to them.
Right. So totally different worldview. And that's what we're being asked to see. He's trying to teach these people the superiority of Jesus in every way. Did you see what I had there? Jesus is already seated at God's right hand. So there's this sense of not yet. We enjoy many of the benefits that God has blessed us with, but we live in a world where there's evil and suffering. Death is everywhere. We have witnessed that here at Parkway as part of our church family. So many family members who have died. Now let me go back to this slide. What can we do? Christian faith refuses two false conclusions. We can pretend that everything is right in the world. No, we can't. We know it's not. And we could just despair. In our series on Wednesday nights, we're talking about drawing near to God. We quoted a psalm, Psalm 73, where this fella sees all that's wrong in the world, and he does despair. And we mentioned a couple of things. One is he was sick. He was physically sick. And does that change your perspective on things when you're not feeling well or are in very dire circumstances? Absolutely. So I want us to get to verse 9. I want us to get to the turning point now. And so here we are. Verse 9 changes everything. But we see Jesus. So we look around and we see the world. It's not in subjection to Christ, but we see Jesus. We see him who for a little while was made lower than the angels, and yet he was crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. And that's going to give way to verses 10 through 18, which are going to go into greater detail about why Jesus became human. And that's the main reason. So he could taste death for you and me. And when he says taste death, he doesn't just mean that he just kind of dipped his toe in it. He endured actual death in the most painful, horrible way imaginable. And that was his crown. That was his glory. Do you remember in the Gospel of John when Jesus said that the Son of Man, talking about himself, will be lifted up? Normally, when you think of being lifted up, what does that denote? Something good or bad? Good. Being lifted up. And that's what Jesus talks about in the Gospel of John. Is he eventually lifted up? And the cross. He's killed in a shameful way. And so what glory was there in being lifted up on a cross and dying? An interesting paradox. How is the cross something glorious?
Well, it accomplished God's plan. It allowed Jesus going from human back to deity and getting that special honor and glory because of what he put up with here.
So Isaac Watts wrote that song that is based on Galatians, the wording of Galatians. Forbid it, Lord, that I should boast, save in the death of Christ my Lord. Paul says, I boast in nothing about myself, but I do boast in this, the cross of Jesus. The world looks at that and sees shame and defeat. What do we see when we see Jesus hanging on that cross? What do we see? Victory. Yes, sir.
Well, when you see Jesus on the cross, today we see the resurrection that followed.
Right.
At the time, those that were visibly or there, there was quite a bit of confusion. Because no, they could not, at that moment, correlate dying on the cross to victory.
Right.
But the resurrection ties all back together.
That song we also sing, Victory in Jesus, it also talks about the cross. And so it's at the cross that we have victory. Yes, ma'am. That's right. If Christ did not become human and taste death for everyone, we would still be in our sin. So Psalm 8 tells us that Jesus was lowered, suffered, and then crowned, glorified. So just as Psalm 8 talks about us being lower than the angels, And this world is it's tough. It's difficult. But Jesus suffered death for us. So everything Jesus has done, he asks us to do. Jesus is the ultimate representative. The king of Israel was supposed to be God's representative. He was supposed to exemplify what it means to be a son of God. Psalm 2, today I have begotten you. You are my son, talking to a human king. Of course, who is the Hebrew preacher going to apply that to? Jesus. He is the Son of God. And he is showing us that ultimate example. David was supposed to show all Israel, this is how you live for the king. I'm the king, but I'm just serving the king over Israel. Did David follow through perfectly? No. No king can. What about this king? What about the ultimate son of David? I mean, you had other kings. You had Rehoboam, and then his son Abijam, and then his son Asa, and his son Jehoshaphat. These are all, I skipped over Solomon, didn't I? And so you've got this long dynasty, this long succession. None of those guys even came close to David. There's one king that we know very little about, Jotham. Nothing bad is said. Well, that's not true. Something bad is said about him. He didn't destroy all the high places, but otherwise, nothing else. And throughout 1 Kings and 2 Kings, every king of the southern kingdom that had a son of David, every king is compared to David. By the way, every king in the northern kingdom is compared to Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. And how many good kings were there in the southern kingdom? Well, yeah, there were a few. But this is an easy question. How many kings in the northern kingdom? None. Not a single one. Not many of the kings in the southern kingdom either. The southern kingdom of Judah, which was ultimately destroyed by the Babylonians. But Jesus didn't just take a sip or a sample of death. He took it on fully and completely. Do you remember when James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus, and they had a very simple, little, humble request? Can one of us sit on your right hand, preferably me, and then my brother sit on your left hand? And Jesus said, this is not mine to give you, but let me ask you this. My cup, can you drink my cup? And do you remember what those boys said? Yes. What cup was Jesus referring to? His cup of suffering and death. James died in Acts 12. Now, John, as far as we know, what we understand is that he lived on probably into the 80s, 90s, which means he'd have to be pretty young in the 80s, 30s. But people who knew John talk about him very late in life. And there are some church fathers, we call them, people who were friends of the apostles, students of the apostles. One of them is Papias, very early on, and says, I knew John. But eventually, they suffer. Where was John the apostle when he wrote the revelation of Jesus? On Paphos. Why? For persecution. All right. Are we going to taste? Are we going to have to drink the cup of the Lord? Do we suffer?
Are we willing to do that? Take Dwayne's poison.
Yeah. Dwayne, killing off those poor little ants. Can you bring some of that poison over to my yard? I've got a couple places. All right. So I don't want to go into verses 10 through 18, but that's where we're going to quit this morning. Look at that. I did stop a little early. We're going to quit. Next week, there's material already out there in the foyer. We're going to be in verses 10 through 18, finishing this section. Now, I will only be with you through the end of the month, which means we've got 3 more sessions with me, and we're going to cover the next major section after Hebrews 2, 5 through 18, we're going to look at Hebrews 3 through chapter 4, verse 14, 4 through verse 13, excuse me. And that is the next major section, which, by the way, is dictated by Psalm 95, verses 7 through 11. And so, why don't you do this? This is your homework. Read Hebrews 1 through chapter 4, verse 13. See the introduction, how it's introducing us and just flows right into the first major discussion about Jesus, his humility, his submission, his glory, and how we are imitating that. And then the next section is don't disbelieve in Jesus, because there's serious punishment if you do. All right. Well, I hope you're enjoying this study of Hebrews. And Larry will be taking over in three more sessions. You're stuck with me for 3 more sessions. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Is good stuff.